Hey, it's Michael Barbaro, host of The Daily from the New York Times. The story of Washington right now is filled with characters that we are all talking about. Cabinet secretaries and political aides have become household names. Steve Bannon, Betsy DeVos, Scott Pruitt, Jared Kushner. They are remaking Washington. They are the new Washington. We know their nicknames, we know their rivalries, but we don't know them or their motivations. That's why The Daily is launching a new series, The New Washington. For the next few months, we'll be interviewing the person that you want to hear from each week, with analysis and commentary from my colleagues in DC, like Carl Hulse. Hello? Hulse?
Yes.
It's Michael.
Michael.
We were up so late last night.
Ooh, welcome to Covering Congress. You haven't lived till you've been in the Capitol all night with everybody with their beards growing out. And, it's ugly.
And the cots.
Those cots are never even used. They are the oldest prop in congressional history.
Oh, they're all just about the idea that we're going to sleep in the office?
Bullshit.
Even the ones who promise you that they sleep on the cots in their
Nobody
office?
sleeping on those cots. Oh, well, no, those guys actually, they sleep on their couches and stuff. But I mean, when they roll out those cots, that's a pure gimmick. They do it every time. Everybody goes and takes a picture and no one sleeps in the cots.
All right. So, Carl, I want to try something with you. I want to name a few figures in Washington and have you tell me something that I don't know about them.
Yeah.
Ready?
This is the lightning round. Yeah.
This is lightning round. House Speaker Paul Ryan.
We need the facts. It is obvious there are some people out there who want to harm the president.
He gets his hair cut at the same place I do by the same woman, Hannah at Bubbles on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Price of the cut?
I think it's $40. I don't know if it is. Well, it's pretty pricey. I don't know if he gets a deal, but he brings in more security than I do.
So not a John Edwards cut?
No.
And
he cuts a lot of congressional hair, by the way. Yeah.
Bubbles?
Well, I know. I hesitated to even bring it up, but it's the name of a chain.
Sure,
Yes.
no doubt. Senator Chuck Schumer.
President Trump did a tweet last night and a tweet this morning. Not presidential.
Always interesting with food. He, when I was in his office after the election, I noticed that he ate his candy bar frozen, which, we used to do as kids. And then he said, the frozen candy bar's off the record. I go, no way. I go, no. I said, we won't take a picture of you eating it if that's what's worrying you, but I'm putting it in the story.
Senator Mitch McConnell, Majority Leader.
This is, clearly a disappointing moment. Our constituents have suffered through an awful lot under Obamacare. We thought they deserved better.
I've dealt with Senator McConnell a lot over the years, but one of the interesting things he told me one time, because Senator McConnell is famous for walking through the hallways and refusing to acknowledge questions from reporters. And he told me once that when he was a junior senator and he'd come out of the lunch and he'd see all the reporters chase the other senators, that he was so jealous that he wished he could be the guy that the reporters were all trying to track down and ask questions.
That's fascinating.
Now he is that guy, and he wants nothing to do with us. So I always thought that was
that's a very vulnerable and human
I thought
moment.
It was really telling, honestly.
All right, Senator Lisa Murkowski.
I do not support repeal of the ACA without a clear replacement.
Who was big in the news this week, obviously. Sure. So a very tough Alaskan. I remember she lives in my neighborhood. Yes, our kids are acquainted. But a few years ago, I think she was backcountry skiing and really just totally destroyed her knee. And to the degree where you wonder, why, if this was going to be a permanent and debilitating injury. And she went through rehab, did everything to the point where you can't even notice it. And not everybody can do that. And she got back skiing. And to me, that's indicative of her toughness.
Oh, that's like the essential backstory of probably the
Yeah.
last couple of days, right? Like, you think you're going to get me to switch my vote?
You should have been in my physical rehab when I had to get my knee
Right.
back in shape.
So, Carl, it's Friday afternoon, and literally as we were sitting here in the studio, we got the news that
Breaking news
Reince
right
Priebus
now. It's being
is
reported that
out
Reince Priebus
as White House
is
Chief of
out
Staff.
as
that he
White
was
House Chief of
pushed
Staff.
out of the job. Let's talk about this current cast of characters. I guess Reince is
Yeah,
off
he's
the list as
an
of
ex
tonight,
character now.
as is Sean Spicer.
Yes.
I wish him continued success as he moves on to pursue new opportunities. Just look at his great television ratings.
Scaramucci maybe is on the list now.
I was in the Oval Office with him earlier today, and we were talking about letting him be himself, letting him express his full identity. I think he's got some of the best political instincts in the world and perhaps in history.
Who, in your mind, are the most important people in Washington?
Well, I mean, the president is always the most important person.
With the exception of the late, great Abraham Lincoln, I can be more presidential than any president that's ever held this office.
So, you have the president, you have Steve Bannon, you have the players at the White House. But, the most important people in Washington are still the people who you would think are important besides the president. The Speaker of the House is important. I think Mitch McConnell is an extraordinarily important person in Washington because, you can push things through the House. Mitch McConnell is sort of, in some ways, the arbiter of what can really happen because he has to be able to get 60 votes usually. So, in some ways, the flow chart hasn't changed. There's some different characters at the White House, but things still have to work. I say the most important people in Washington in some respects right now are names I don't even know. They're the investigative accountants who are working for the special counsel, right? We don't even know where these guys are working from, but those are also very important people, who are staffing these investigations whose names we don't know and probably will never know, to tell you the truth.
Carl, who else are you interested in Washington right now?
Richard Burr is someone who interests me a lot. He is the chairman of the Intelligence Committee from North Carolina, a fun-loving politician who, likes to get the joke about Washington. He drives this old beat-up Volkswagen thing. He doesn't wear socks. But he... Yeah, he's a bit of a frat boy, but I say that in a complimentary way. Here's a guy who's been thrust into this investigation.
Do you have any doubt that Russia attempted to interfere in the 2016 elections?
None.
Kind of a thankless job, and he's taking it pretty seriously and taking it on and trying to move this forward. So I think he's an interesting person. Lamar Alexander, who now with the failure of the health care bill, he's the former presidential candidate, senator from Tennessee. He's going to have to try and pick up the pieces of health care now and move things along.
I agree with President Trump that we should replace and repeal major parts of Obamacare at the same time.
And then, of course, you have a whole bunch of Democratic senators that people talk about as possible presidential candidates that people are looking at, and they kind of add to the flavor right now of things that are going on here.
We got to be in the fight. We cannot lay down and play dead. We got to be in this fight.
Yeah. So we started to talk about this a little bit, but I'm struck by how quickly in the new Washington people's fortunes are rising and falling and literally like tipping out of the building.
Yeah, everything's a little bit at light speed right now. And this is a town, although, Reince Priebus is now out the door. It's one of those things like if you hold on to your job, even in the face of an onslaught. Let's talk about Jeff Sessions, right?
I have the honor of serving as Attorney General. It's something that goes beyond any thought I would have ever had for myself. We love this job, we love this department, and I plan to continue to do so as long as that is appropriate.
He's hunkered down there now, and he doesn't want to go. So maybe his fortunes will come back up, right? I also thought it was interesting about Jeff Sessions. One of the questions I get asked all the time now is, when are the congressional Republicans going to step in and really confront President Trump?
The president has the right to fire anybody in his cabinet. As a human being, I think he should show some respect for Jeff Sessions as a person.
Well, I didn't know the red line was going to be Jeff Sessions, right? Because they did. And they sent the president a very strong message to quit messing with their friend Jeff.
This effort to basically marginalize and humiliate the Attorney General is not going over well in the Senate. If Jeff Sessions is fired, there will be holy hell to pay.
And since this week, I think that he has backed off a little bit. So it was also a classic case of the Senate protecting its own, which is a grand tradition there. But, you know, if you can survive maybe when you go into the dumps, maybe you can rise again when the president's favor turns back on you and against someone else.
So it feels really difficult to get the people we're talking about, and just about anybody in Washington, to talk candidly. There's really kind of a one-dimensionality to the way that we process and see and even hear kind of official Washington figures who make policy and who govern. And they go on the Sunday shows and they get grilled in a very predictable way.
Joining me now to discuss this and much more is the incoming White House Communications Director, Anthony Scaramucci. First of all, Anthony, congratulations on the new job.
It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for that, Jay.
So you come to the White House at a time when President Trump has historically low approval ratings. He has signed into law 0 major pieces of legislation. Healthcare is on life support. Multiple investigations are underway. I guess the big question is President Trump facing a communications problem, or is it a substance problem?
Did you leave anything out? I mean, you were doing pretty well there.
I gave you a short version.
Okay, listen.
They get mobbed in the halls of Congress. They seem incredibly gun-shy about revealing themselves. But of course, there's actual humanity there, and they're people. How often do you see that?
Yeah, it's actually diminishing, unfortunately. I mean, the reporting in the Capitol right now, there's a lot of reporters. The stories are big. They're chasing down members in the hall.
Now, wait a minute. We're not at the conference yet. We got to get something out of the Senate before you.
And it's hard to get them to open up in that situation. They kind of give canned quotes. I think what you really need to do is get them away a little bit. They will open up. Of course, you know, everyone's perfectly willing to be candid when they're on background or off the record, you know.
Right. Eating their candy bars. Carl, you may remember this. Last week, I interviewed Tom Rooney. He's a really little-known Republican congressman from Florida.
I can't tell you how many times I'm sitting, listening to people talk, and I'm just like thinking to myself, you know, if my dad would walk in the room right now and we'd give him 5 minutes, he would have this all cleaned up. Just because I think that he'd be like an adult in the room.
And when you say your dad, you just mean like a rational figure, unencumbered by
I actually mean
politics.
my dad, but you know, it just seems like a lot of people in that generation wouldn't put up with a lot of the nonsense that we do here.
I thought he was incredibly candid with us, and our listeners thought he was. You're a pretty good arbiter of these things. Was he?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, one of the advantages of the things you're doing with these podcasts, and I've discovered this with lawmakers, is if you give them a chance to talk and they know that a lot of their words are going to be used, they can be forthcoming. It's a situation that's different where I'm going to sit there and scribble down a few notes and take some quotes and put it in the paper, right? And I get to select those quotes, and I get to select what comes ahead of that quote or after that quote. I have found that if you give them a chance and you're going to sit them down and have an intelligent conversation in front of a microphone, that they are willing to talk. But you have to give them a little room.
Right. So, Carl, over the coming weeks, we are going to be talking to a number of these people in the new Washington. Why do we need to be having these conversations, do you think, right now?
Well, I mean, I think people are really confused about what's going on here and what it all means. I also get, you know, probably, honestly, the most common question I get is, have you ever seen anything like this before? You know, that's what I get when I'm walking around. And I think, you know, we can rely on these people to tell us, one, have they ever seen anything like this before? And give them a chance to explain from their perspective what is actually going on. But I think people around the country, they're just seeing chaos, right? When you're watching this from afar. If you're watching TV right now, all you're seeing is, wow, the health care bill went down. The chief of staff just got pushed out. A new guy's coming in. He's a military person. You know, the events are it's cascading.
Carl, we can't wait to hear and talk about these conversations.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. Let's get some people on and ask them about what's happening.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Michael.
You can listen and subscribe to The New Washington on Apple Podcasts, nytimes.com or wherever you get your podcasts.